In the United Kingdom, a book by well-known investigative journalist Nick Stapleton, How to Beat Scammers, has been published. It explains in detail how various scam schemes work, how to recognize them, and how to avoid them. Latvia is specifically mentioned both in the book and in several of Stapleton's articles in the British media. The mule transfers the victim's money to another mule account who takes the share. The second mule sends the money to a third account in the UK, all combined with different British banks. Finally, the third mule sends the money internationally to a bank in Latvia. That mule sends it to Thailand. The Thai mule finally sends the victim's cash back to an account in India, and it makes its way to the scammers. Latvia is not usually among the countries favored by fraudsters, and upon consulting the author of the book, it was clarified that Latvia was mentioned only as an example.
The most common third-party countries that I see would be like Baltic states, so countries like Estonia, Latvia, that's fairly common, I would say. But I don't think there's necessarily any particular reason for that beyond where the scammers' contacts are. So, for example, if there is a group of scammers operating phone scams out of India, which is very common, India has quite a big problem with phone call scams for various quite interesting reasons. It's quite common for them to have contacts in Europe because of the fact that there's a lot of South Asian diaspora who live all over Europe. So they might have relatives who live in Riga, or they might have family who live in Tallinn, or they might have some friends who live in Berlin. And so the mule accounts will end up being in those countries because of the fact that just because their contacts are there, essentially. So I think if you look at different parts of the world, the mule accounts will come from different places.
There are no statistics in Latvia that would confirm or refute the involvement of people of specific nationalities in money mule activity. However, publicly available data from the Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs for 2025 shows that currently 4,773 Indians reside in Latvia, many of whom have likely arrived to study. Money mule cases are not listed separately in statistics, but it is known that in 2022, 395 criminal proceedings were initiated for money laundering, while in 2023 the number had decreased to 236, and last year to 183. Around 100 cases reach the courts each year. Constitutional Court Judge Juris Juris believes that Latvia is tackling money laundering quite successfully, and the number of proceedings reflects the good work of law enforcement agencies rather than a worsening money laundering problem.
Citreiz tā netaisnība notiek tajā formātā, ka jo tu esi efektīvāks, jo tu vairāk konstatē un identificē šos gadījumus, jo vairāk par identificētiem gadījumiem uzzini. Un savukārt, ja tu esi pilnīgi neefektīvs, tev to gadījumu nav, ir tas latentums, par kuru visi runā, bet, lai tu to balstītu uz kaut kādiem datiem, tu to nevari izdarīt. Un līdz ar to sanāk tāda absurda situācija, ka tie, kas efektīvi cīnās ar to, pieliek pūliņus, ja, ir plašāk redzeslokā, un šad tad retu gadījumu nepareizi tiek iztulkots šie te pūliņi.
Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, data from the Financial Conduct Authority FCA shows that in 2022 a total of 194,084 mule accounts were closed. However, only 37% of these cases were reported to the National Fraud Database. It is not known whether any of these cases have reached court. In both the United Kingdom and Latvia, a significant proportion of money mules are young people.
Tie studējošie, jeb tas vecums, kurā studijas vēl ir aktuāls, kā saka, kur nešķiet 200 eiro kaut kas tāds, kā lai saka, no vienas puses milzīgs, bet no otras puses pārskaitot tur 3, 4, 5 tūkstošus, saņem 200, liekas ļoti viegla nauda, ja, un pēc būtības, nekas taču šausmīgi traks nevar notikt, ja kaut kāds 2, 3 tūkstoši tur pārskait, tie taču nav miljoni.
The penalties can vary. But, for example, for transferring the mentioned €2,000, a prison sentence of up to 4 years may be imposed. But that's not all.
Viņiem kā pārsteigums daudziem ir tas, ka no viņiem piedzen pilnīgi visu to summu, kas ir legalizēta, kas ir aizgājusi projām. Un līdz ar to tas noziedzīgs nodarījums vairāk nekādā veidā neatpelnās.
Fraud in the UK is one of the most common types of crime, with an estimated 3.9 million fraud cases last year alone in England and Wales.
Now, imagine the man hours, imagine the paperwork that is involved in doing that simple fraud investigation. It's enormous. And that's why so little international cross-border fraud like this is solved. It's because the people who have the skills to do that kind of investigation are dedicated to investigating hundreds of millions of euros worth of fraud. They don't look at single cases of one person who maybe lost 5,000 euros, 6,000 euros, 10,000 euros. They will look at some massive organized crime group who are doing hundreds of millions. So the expectation of that person who was scammed is, or that person whose money was stolen, is of course that the police are going to do everything to get their money back, because to that individual, that's probably a life-changing amount of money. But the reality of the situation, unfortunately, is simply that the work involved in tracking that money down is going to mean that it's highly unlikely to happen.
The problem with investigating various cybercrimes is global, as not all countries are able or willing to cooperate.
Krievija, veicot kara darbību suverēnajā Ukrainā, šobrīd okupētajās teritorijās, nodarbojas ar resursu izlaupīšanu. Izlaupot šos resursus, tie resursi tiek tirgoti to starp Eiropas Savienības valstīs, no kurienes tie līdzekļi plūst atpakaļ uz Krieviju. Un Latvija, kā viena no daudzām valstīm, ir spējīga noķert šos līdzekļus. Bet redzēt, ja mēs runājam par to sākotnējo noziegumu, mums nav iespējas uzjautāt Ukraiņiem, lai viņi mums palīdz Donbas okupētajā teritorijā identificēt, kurš konkrēti tad tur ir tos līdzekļus, resursus izlaupījis, ja, vai, piemēram, prasīt absurdi Vladimiram Putinam, ja, šim noziedzniekam, lai viņš mums tagad uzsāk procesu pret saviem cilvēkiem, ja, nodod viņus kriminālu vajāšanai.
However, returning to the topic of Latvia as a possible transit country for money laundering, while in 2018 Latvia's financial sector was criticized for serving non-residents and for money laundering, particularly in relation to Russia and former USSR countries, the situation has changed drastically since 2020 thanks to improvements in financial supervision. It should also be noted that Latvia has never been included in the United Kingdom's list of high-risk countries.